Welcome to Look Around the Confederation. I'm your host for the evening, Moose. And before we get started, please remember, the views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the SCV, its GEC, nor Division, Brigade, Camps, or subsidiaries. How is everybody doing in Dixieland tonight? We have a great show for you planned. Of course, I'm joined by my partner in crime, GCB, and by the great, the good, the lovely Commander-in-Chief Jason Boshers.
At least you didn't say you were the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, that feels more appropriate, you know. It really does. I could accept good, the bad, and the ugly, but didn't he say lovely? I thought that was He said lovely, right? Isn't that a Carl Jones expression right there? Because isn't Carl Jones the lovely one?
Carl Jones is the lovely one. You're just lovely level right now. You're going to have to work hard to get to the lovely one.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure I don't crowd in on the Carl Jones loveness. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, he's still there. I thought I moved him out of shot.
Clearly you didn't.
Well, I'm comfortable with Santa being there. It's cool.
He looks like he's coming in to rob me. He's just in the back corner of the shot.
Yeah.
Well, Commander, how are you doing?
Doing well. Been very busy. April, as you know, is Confederate History Month, and we've been doing a lot of stuff, staying real busy. Right now, getting ready for the Tennessee Division reunion that's going to be going on this coming weekend, which the camp I'm in is hosting. So we've been having a lot of fun with that. You know, there's always these things, that you can't do until you get pretty close to the end. We went ahead and got a lot of our prep stuff done, but then you have last minute changes as always. So we're just getting everything going and got that. And what about y'all? What are y'all doing this weekend, or what are y'all doing to finish out Confederate History Month?
Well, Moose and I will be at Beauvoir, the last home of Confederate President Davis, for the Mississippi Division memorial service. That's this weekend. And Sunday, I think, Moose, don't y'all have your camp's memorial service?
Yep, my camp will have our memorial service at 2 p.m. Sunday. And that will kind of be a wrap on April for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got a service in Jackson. I'm torn between going to the service in Jackson or the service in Vicksburg. Both of those are rather close for me. Jackson's literally right outside of home, but Vicksburg's a nice about an hour. And for a year there, it felt like every road that I took led to Vicksburg. So it's been a while since I've been to Vicksburg. I was doing some history studying on some of my dad's old papers and things following the Vicksburg campaign. So, yeah.
Yeah, it feels weird that the month is ending.
Boy, it has been a fast month. It's been something every day. Very good. And always something to do, always something going on. And, this is April's a special time for our Confederate veterans. It means so much, from the start of the war to the end of the war. And now you talk about that proclamation that I issued, making, April, recognizing April's Confederate History Month, and then making the day the Charge Day. And to me, that was, I've read quite a bit about the Charge. Now, I haven't done a talk on the Charge now since I think I was Army commander. It has been a number of years since I did a talk on the Charge and what all it means. And I know we got some other stuff that we're going to take care of, so we're not going to jump into this right now, but I think that it's very good of y'all to have an episode where we're dedicating it to the Charge. And today just seemed to work out. It's Thursday. It's time for Look Around the Confederation. And in 1906, on this day in 1906, he said those words. And he passed that bloodline from the UCV to the SCV. At that point, we inherited that bloodline.
And also it's a special day because 4 years ago, the three of us, and Carl was a part of it as well, was SCV chat was kind of semi-conceived. Our first live stream event together. So got a bunch of good meetings for the day.
Yes. And I like to go ahead and clear up a little something. A lot of times when I realized when I was talking, I said something, and it comes from having to talk so many different people. When I talk about the end of the war, the end of the war was Appomattox, but it wasn't the end of the fighting. And that is what I'm trying to tell people, is that, yes, you had the Army of Northern Virginia that surrendered with Robert E. Lee and Appomattox. Okay. But that wasn't the end of the fighting. As we know, the fighting continued on. Really, physically at that time, the fighting continued on. It went on for a while longer. And of course, we're still fighting the fight as of today. So I realize I get in a habit of saying stuff, and sometimes some habits you got to work on breaking. But I just wanted some clarity that the end of the war, when I say the end of the war, I'm referring to the surrender of the Army, but not the fighting for what they believed was right. And that is the point of the Charge. Is that me making that noise?
Possibly.
Who knows?
I think it's Harrison because he keeps moving around and shuffling papers.
Okay.
So, I mean,
if we kick him off stream, and it's still going on, then we'll know.
Let's not test the theories. And now I think y'all are jumping to conclusions. But yeah, no, it's weird this year. Speaking of the end of things, like there's a couple of Confederate Heritage Memorial services I have in May. I'm going to go to, of course, we have the pilgrimage that first weekend in May. And then a close. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I'm glad you brought up the pilgrimage, and because we did have a question from Mark Carter really quickly. Let me find nope. Santa was supposed to be laying on the floor.
That's a grandmother antique, and she's like my mother, and you should know better than pissing off a Southern mother.
Miss Roxy. But anyway, Mark Carter did ask. It's said it's a little bit off subject, but while we're on the topic of it, can you shed some light on the Forest Pilgrimage on May 4th?
Absolutely, sure can. We will. The grounds are open at 9:00. Also, that day, the Army of Tennessee is having a workshop, and that's going to be going on in the old meeting room of the home Elm Springs, and that's going to start at 9. Somewhere around 10:30, quarter till 11. The Army of Tennessee workshop will end. Well, it won't end. It'll just take a break because the pilgrimage will start at 11. The pilgrimage, and like I said, the ground's going to be open. You'll be able to come there. You'll be able to tour the museum. and you'll be able to tour the grounds. And at 11 o'clock at the equestrian statue with King Philip, Forest on top of King Philip, we are going to have we'll have the service. President General Jenny Wadowski of the UDC is going to be our keynote speaker. And then we'll be having the wreath laying like we have every other year. And then the grounds, so then as far as the workshop goes, they'll go back to the workshop, and then grounds will close around 4 o'clock.
Yeah, and we just confirmed this yesterday for those attending the AOT workshop. There may or may not be a talk given by some guys who've had some varied success on social media and how to use social media properly on the camp level.
This is going to happen during the workshop on May the 4th.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be after Rich Garcia talks about the trading cards that the Tennessee Division's doing. It's going to be about 15 to 30 minutes is their time frame.
Okay. Well, good. So we're going to be talking about using social media. Good thing. That's a good thing.
So
Connor already has it all planned.
Okay. Well,
we just confirmed it yesterday.
Okay, just confirmed it yesterday. I was listening this past Monday night, and I was amazed at the numbers you put out. You've had over 700,000 viewers just this year since January. 700,000.
Mm-hmm. And that's just on Facebook. That's not including. Yeah, that's not including our YouTube and other platform statistics.
Are they? I noticed from watching on Monday night as well on SCV Chat that you had a few people come on and start making comments, and you were responding to questions off YouTube. So, are you getting quite a few viewers on YouTube over there now? Is the channel taking off well? Well,
Moose, how about you share the news that you broke to me earlier?
All right. So it is a long and hard process, but we have finally become partners on YouTube.
Which means that we should be able to launch our own YouTube TV channel at some point. I think I read that.
Yes. So it'd be kind of like, we talked about doing those pay-per-view tours of battlefields and such, and other such content that is exclusive that we'll talk about at some point. But what this does, it will basically mean that now we can continue that content on YouTube, as well as now our YouTube videos are going to easily pick up a bit more steam. Live streams on YouTube now will get a bit more interesting because we can now create custom emojis for the chat heads over on YouTube. So one of them just be a picture of Connor and it just says freeze. And other stuff like that. Like it's going to help us bring a lot of cool stuff to YouTube. And again, that just gives us one more thing we can give the chat heads to have fun and enjoy the shows that we produce. And a couple other interesting content we'll hope to be bringing to YouTube soon.
Yeah.
So we're growing. We're growing. I mean, I've got a new background, with the books and little Rob and baby Jake Donaldson up here. I guess I could point up there and microphone, and soon to be a new camera.
Well done. Well done.
Will we be doing YouTube shorts? Of course we will. In fact, we're shooting one. We're shooting one this Saturday, while at Beauvoir, provided the wind works right for us.
Me to kind of say the two things we're kind of doing with the YouTube shorts?
Nope.
All righty then.
Keep it a surprise. Yeah, we want people to watch them, not necessarily just we heard about it, and we want to keep the suspense going. Stone Mountain also is another one that is never. Sarge Green Trees. Stone Mountain's another event that's going on this weekend. We see several people in the chat that are, having grave dedications, grave erections, Southern Cross of Honor dedications, stuff like that. Really out there living the charge, and good job, compatriots, and definitely send in your pictures from that so we can share them out there, not only on Look Around but on the page as well, so that we can continue to highlight what our organization does.
Agreed. I hope that you've gotten some of the things that we were involved in last weekend. We had something at Rose Hill Cemetery, which if you come to the Tennessee Division reunion, we're going to do another Confederate tour out there. So we had a Confederate memorial service at Rose Hill, and then we had a gravestone dedication. We erected a gravestone and a Southern Cross of Honor on Sunday. So we had something on Saturday and Sunday. I really have become a fan of doing Southern Cross of Honor services and gravestone services. And I have really found that the best way for us to get the most people there is not to do them on Sunday, and not to do them on Saturday, but to do them on Sunday after church. Give everybody time to go to church, and of course you go eat afterward, do whatever you're supposed to do afterward, and then come to the cemetery where we have had pretty good turnouts, better than we did when we were doing some of them on Saturday, because everybody has something to do on Saturday.
And at that point, you're already dressed up.
Yes.
True.
Mm-hmm. So I hope you got those pictures. If not, I'll get you some.
You did not.
We'll be posting them on Facebook. I did comment on one of them. I have a special request that you wear that lovely fedora to the camp meeting.
Okay.
I just really like the fedora. It makes you look distinguished.
I've been called lovely and distinctive, or whatever that word is.
Yeah. It was enough.
he's kissing up. He wants some type of medal.
I mean, I think something would look good right here on the show.
Well, I've been sitting on Facebook a lot of camps and divisions, and men are out there doing stuff during this month, and I am very happy. That makes me very happy that they were doing something. If at no other time of the year you do anything, do something during Confederate History Month. And I think that's what I've said a couple of times now, just do something. And I've been seeing them out there, and it's a good thing. I'm proud of everybody.
Me too. It's an honor to, I say it a lot. It's an honor to get this stuff sent to us, to share it out, because a lot of times we'll even get overwhelmed in April because a lot of people will send stuff in, and it's just so many great things. And we ask that you guys continue to send stuff in. Make sure you keep sending your events so we can put them on the SCV Chat events page. It's just been a fantastic April. Honestly, yeah. I've it's really been awesome. Hey, Liberty fan in the house, go Flames!
And I agree that it has been a good month, and I can tell that by how fast it's gone by. Mm-hmm. It has really gone by very fast this month. Hard to believe it's just a few days left.
Yeah, but we're here to talk about something special, right?
Today is a special day.
We're going to talk about
Yep.
I'm really proud of the graphics I've been creating here of late. If you can't tell, that one took some time to get General Lee angled right and make everything match. So but we're here to talk about the charge, the pivotal thing that turned the SCV from what we were to what we are.
It was, sometimes great things happen and you don't know it's a great thing until after it's already happened. And it's down the road, it's months, it's years. And then you realize, okay, this was a pivotal moment. Stephen Dill Lee might not have ever realized this was a pivotal moment in the history of our organizations and the combination and the joining of our two organizations. We were separate because you had the UCV and they had their meetings, and then you had the SCV. And at this point in time, when he gave the speech, and I think there's parts in the speech, if you will, I'm sure most people out there have read the speech. Okay. If you hadn't, take time to read the entire thing. It isn't very long. It really isn't. Not in the grand scheme of things, but you'll see where he tells this whole history of us. And then at the very end was when he starts talking about the passing of the organization. And there's just, and it wasn't just to the sons. He told the daughters, he told the people of the Southland, he told the brave people of the South. And he made some statements in there. And I did review it once again before this started tonight. And I was, I'd forgotten a piece of it. And I'm going to tell you the piece that I had forgotten. And that was when he is talking about Joe Wheeler. Mm-hmm. And he talks about Joe Wheeler, and he says we had just lost Joe Wheeler. And of course, he gives this to us in April 25th of 1906, when we had lost Joe Wheeler back in January. So he had only been gone 3 months maybe before this happened. And he reflected back on him, and he talked about him being buried in Arlington. And I have been to Arlington. I know a great many of us have. I don't remember seeing that in Section 16, because Section 16 is the Confederate section. And Joe Wheeler isn't buried in Section 16. He's buried in a different section, Section 2, and he's in spot 1089. And he even mentioned in his speech about him being buried at Arlington. Yeah. And when I read that, I'm going, this was just another one of those moments that you realize all of our history really gets tied together. And it was one of those moments that, yes, that was something that happened in 1906 when he gave that talk. And then here we are in 2024 having to go through what we're going through with Arlington. And we're continuing to go through it. But I had forgot about that spot where he talks about Joe Wheeler. Now, I'm assuming both of y'all have reviewed the speech.
Mm-hmm. I just posted in the chat a second ago for those that want a copy of it, both on YouTube and on Facebook. Y'all should be able to see the link from the Charleston Athenaeum Press that has the entire charge on there. The Texas division used to have it on a PDF page on their website, but when I tried to pull it up earlier, I got a 404 not found. But the text is there for anybody that wants to follow along. And I've got, like we said, in our graphics, we got some very specific things. One thing while we're talking about it, Lee has 3 things that he's mentioning in the charge that are very important to him. I'll go ahead and throw that graphic up if I can find it really quickly. 3 concerns. One is the erection of public Confederate monuments. 2, let us pass the remainder of our days in such ways that nothing we do shall bring shame and regret that we also were Confederate soldiers. And last of all, let us remember our less prosperous comrades. Those are his 3 concerns. But I love what he said in when talking about when he was talking about the monuments. He says that, one of these is the erection of public monuments to our Confederate dead, not only to our leaders, but above all to those private soldiers who made our leaders immortal. And he goes on and he talks about how the South was rebuilding and was in some material prosperity at that time. And after my favorite quote, where he says, "Theirs was the martyr's devotion without the martyr's hope," he says, and I quote, "I urge monuments to the Confederate soldier, at first not for the sake of the dead, but most for the sake of the living, that in this busy industrial age, these stones to the Confederate soldier may stand like great interrogation marks to the soul of each beholder." And when I read it years ago, I didn't really think about it, but rereading it today, and seeing the importance of him saying interrogation mark, which also means question mark, it immediately popped just into my mind, Commander-in-Chief Jason Boshers.
What?
Okay.
So he says,
are you talking about Joshua chapter 4? I see that graphic popped up.
Yeah.
There was some noise that come across there, and I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Oh, so in Lee's speech, he says that I'll repeat it just in case it was on my end. I urge monuments to the Confederate soldier, first for the sake of the dead, but most for the sake of the living. That in this busy industrial age, these stones to the Confederate soldier may stand like great interrogation marks to the soul of each beholder. And Lee was a smart man. He chose his words for a reason. And I did not recognize originally years ago when I first read it, I did not recognize the biblical importance that he was putting on it until I began thinking about, what does interrogation mean? Interrogation means questions. So question mark. So when the people of the South of that era and of future eras go back and ask, what mean ye these stones? There we go. So really was tickled about rereading that. And then I've got some other points from later on in his speech. One of my favorites, which is kind of one of the things that we have been trying to push here, was this quote from his, that it was Southern hands that set star after star in that blue field of glory. And if any more stars are ever planted, it will be strange if Southerners are not found assisting at their service. Which Lee is saying, it was Southerners that built the bedrock of this nation. It was that literally built the states. Whether he's talking about the founding generation, the generation after that, with men like Calhoun, other noble Southern statesmen, and he was prophesying that in the future, that any other states that are added or anything else is added to America, he would be surprised about, if it wasn't a Southerner that had a hand in it. And that goes back to last week's Monday's episode, where we talked about the importance of Southern culture, Southern history, and Southern legacy, more than just 1861 to 1865, but 1607 to today in its entirety. And why we as Southerners should feel pride in that. That's what Lee is saying here. So I was really, reading that, and that's at the very beginning of the speech when he says it. It's really poignant for us to remember that portion of the charge. And then the next one for me was, I, for one, do not fear the justice, however long delayed, will not ultimately be done to one of the grandest bodies of men who ever battled for independence or triumphing over defeat, bound up the bleeding wounds of their country. Again, he is saying that, and kind of like what we've also said when defending the Confederate soldier, is that not only and back to fighting Joe Wheeler, like you mentioned, Commander, fighting Joe Wheeler after the war still served as and after active Reconstruction, became a U.S. congressman and then was a general in the Spanish-American War, and by him being a general over volunteer cavalry, helped somewhat soothe the wounds of the nation, and that's part of the legacy of the Confederate soldier, that we are charged See what I did there? That we are charged to promote and defend and protect and everything like that. So it's just it just comes full circle every time you reread it.
Very much so. You know, a few of the things that you said then made me want to go back and review something else in his speech. And first of all, I want to thank you for bringing Joshua chapter 4 and the parable of the 12 stones into this. When you start talking about why we have headstones, one of the things that most humbling to me that always comes into my mind when I'm in a cemetery is I'm fulfilling Joshua chapter 4, because it tells you to mark this. And if you haven't studied your Bible, if you do nothing else, go pick up your Bible. I had a preacher a long time ago from the pulpit say, if I don't care if your whole house is dusty and dirty, as long as your Bible is clean and neat, you know. But he was just saying, don't let your Bible get dusty. But go pick your Bible up and read Joshua chapter 4 and the parable of the 12 stones, in which he's telling them one of each of the tribe to pick up a stone, cross the river, and then we're going to place it here. And we're going to place it here so your children and your children's children will ask, what mean ye these stones? And it's a teaching point, but it also serves the purpose of marking a spot. Something happened here. So when you go to a battlefield, something happened, this marked that. If you are in a cemetery and you go to the grave, well, I went to the cemetery and I went and visited my dad. Okay. Something happened there. That's my father. And when I go there, I'm doing what I feel is God's work telling me to do, which is to go, because the Bible tells you to honor your mother and your father. And then it tells you why you put these stones down. So your children and your children's children, first you're marking something happened. Now you're getting to educate the future generations. What do these mean? So when you're in a cemetery and you're doing something and you're at a memorial service, you're standing in a field of stones. You're standing in a field of history. You're standing at a place that something happened. If you're standing in a cemetery and there's 2 people buried there, 2 things happened. If you're standing there and 2,000 people are buried, 2,000 things happened. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Go ahead.
It's interesting.
I say you want to say something.
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting that you mentioned the 5th commandment. The 5th commandment, if you look at it biblically, is the only commandment that has something other than just the commandment in it. The whole commandment is honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land, and that the Lord your God is giving, that the Lord your God is giving you. And it's very important to remember that last portion of it, because it's the only one that has a why do it besides God just says to do it. It's because there's an actual I hate to say consequence, but there's if we look at Newton's laws, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So it's the only commandment that has a reaction directly in the commandment.
Interesting. I have heard that talked about, but I hadn't thought about that in a long time. And yes, you make a very good point there. Thank you for making
I don't want to be chaplain in chief. A couple years ago, we did a talk about Thanksgiving, and I'm just going ahead and shooting that out there. Do not want it.
Okay. Well, okay. I tell you what, it is go ahead. I'm sorry, Moose. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the chaplain in chief job is, unfortunately, Gary Carlisle is my chaplain in chief, and him and I talk quite often. And Gary has his heart in the right place, his mind in the right place. Unfortunately, he has to write notes and letters to people that pass. And I hear people respond because they'll contact me and they'll say, well, I got a letter from the chaplain in chief, and he looked like he just wrote it. It wasn't like it's a rubber stamp You know, it looks like the man took some time to study and to write, and you know, that's being God's servant, and he's doing a great job. But I understand somebody not wanting that job.
Yeah, I'm inadequate for it.
Yes, sir. So am I. But I will go ahead, and there was the point that you brought up that got me on this, and I'm going to have to read it because I try to memorize a lot of stuff. This is one of those that I've tried to memorize, and it doesn't quite come out. It's not my cadence. I can do a Randolph H. McKim. His is kind of my cadence. Stephen Dill Lee and the words and how he writes them and how he places them is not a natural cadence for me. But this is what he said. We leave our motives to the judgment of posterity. In the choice we made, we followed the dictates of conscience and the voice of honor. We sacrificed all that men hold dear for the land of our birth. And while we have no fear that history will record our deeds with shame, we do not regard even the verdict of posterity as the equivalent of a clear conscience, nor ought we to have been false to our convictions, even to win the eternal praise of mankind. That last little piece, nor ought we to have been false to our convictions, even to win the eternal praise of mankind. We did something. They're already talking about us. They were talking about us. They have been now for 40 years. We know how they view us. We know how they see us. We did what our duty told us to do. We did what our conscience told us to do. We did what our honor told us to do. Were we not supposed to do that to get, as he calls it, the eternal praises of mankind? Do you do the right thing and get praised? Do you do the wrong thing and get praised, or do you do the right thing and get treated like Maine veterans fit for derision, as Patrick Claiborne said? Do you do the right thing, knowing that you're going to be chastised, knowing you're going to be made fun of, knowing they're going to ridicule you? Or do you throw your conscience out the window, throw your soul out the window, and do what is pleasing in other people's eyes? These were the men. And I'm going to stop right there because I want to say the first two words, because we haven't even said what the charge is yet. We have yet to quote it. But I'm going to give you the first two words. To you. You realize that he said to you. He didn't say to all. He didn't say, he just said to you. He was telling us that this is the reason why I call it the passing of the bloodline of these organizations. We already had the bloodline flowing from the father to the son, and from that son to the next son, and from that son to the next son. We already had the bloodline, the physical bloodline. But when it was said to you, the UCV passed their bloodline, the bloodline of that organization, to us. And to me, those are two very important words. To you. I'm going to be quiet and let y'all talk for a moment. I've talked a lot.
Yeah, Moose actually has notes for tonight, so I'm going to let him do some chatting.
Well, you obviously haven't checked the private chat. But
okay.
I do have something I can say. I do. Okay. Y'all have stolen all my stuff, but I looked through Connor's notes, and he has half of mine. And good old Commander Boshers came in for the final blow. But, a couple things I do want to talk about is I like the fact that he says, so far as lies in our power, we have to striven that history may not lack the evidence of his purity of motive, his fortitude, and heroism. You know, of course, the whole charge he's talking about our duty to honor our ancestors and make sure their motives and their stuff are not forgotten, but he still feels the need to say it. You know, it is our job to make sure that the motives of our ancestors are not forgotten, their fortitude, their heroism, that these were the best the South had, and we sent them forward. And, you know, we made a great generation of men, And something else I kind of liked that he talked about, and kind of might have covered this. I'm hoping not. We're about to find out. But talking about the erections of monuments to Confederate dead, General Lee makes a specific point to say not only to our leaders, but above all to those private soldiers who made our leaders immortal. I love hearing local history because you're not going to get that anywhere else. When Commander Boshers comes to my camp, he will get an earful on Captain Samuel H. Poe, the legend of Wayne County, Mississippi. And it is important that we don't only just honor our leaders, but also the privates, the soldiers that made them immortal. That hits me hard because my ancestor was a private. I don't know if who has a high-ranking officer either in the chat or if GCB does or you do, Commander Boshers. But, you know, Private S.O. Dawes had been in Mississippi for 15 years trying to start a farm and work at the post office. And in his mid-40s, around my father's age now, he signed up to go to war to defend his home from invading forces because we were poor dirt. We were the definition of Mississippi poor farmers. It took my ancestor years to buy the land that's still in my family today. And that really hits me here. And I cannot agree more that we have to strive to make sure not only our great leaders are immortalized, but so are the soldiers, the privates, the everyday man.
Well, I think that we have, and you're right. And just to get back to that one point that you brought up, all of the great generals did notice that, did give the credit to the men. You know, Stonewall, Thomas Jonathan Jackson, he always said that the term Stonewall Brigade, it belonged to the men. It didn't belong to him. He was the one that had the moniker placed on him, but he always said it belonged to the men. Lee always talked about how brave and valiant the men that served under him were. You know, this is all of the great leaders know they're put there to do the job. But how well the job gets done is left up to the man that's underneath them that's getting things done. And if they fight well and they follow the commands and it's a well thought out plan, then there you go. So they realize that the men underneath them, y'all are finding something absolutely hilarious.
I found my quote that I was looking for. And Connor was making fun of me for the fact that he knew what my quote was and I didn't. But he goes on later in the charge and says, and I wanted to bring this up specifically with my point tied to the private Confederate, their generation and their country imposed upon them this high service. They fulfilled it without flinching. They felt that the issue of the battle was with God. The issue of their duty was with themselves.
Yeah. He wrote some powerful words with all of that. Now we've kind of talked everybody to the point of taking us up to where he actually.
Well, before we get to the different,
you knew where I was going.
Yeah, before we get to that portion of it,
Right.
Just because somebody asked a minute ago about in the chat, what did the Confederate soldier fight for? And we've kind of hit on it. It generally hits on it. And I just had some more quotes taken from the charge that I just thought were appropriate to add while we're talking about the motivation of the Confederate soldier. And is there any message we would like to give to the states we loved and on whose behalf we drew our swords more than a generation ago? We chose for you the fortune of war rather than a shameful peace. We battled for your principles rather than yield them, not to conviction, but to force. With breaking hearts, we bowed beneath the stroke of fate. And then he also later goes on and says, we chose the only course worthy of Americans. Better defeat than dishonor, better the long, bitter story of Reconstruction than the tame surrender of the convictions we received from our fathers. So that would mean the founding generation, the principles that we cherish as the basis of our liberties. So I just wanted to throw those up there.
I'm going to bring in one more thing before we go on. Because, again, Commander Boshers, you're right. He was such a powerful speaker, and these words still hit home over what 100 years later, or more than 100 years. I'm awful at math, and it is not computing well. I've been in the sun all day, but two things I wanted to bring up specifically because it hit me hard. Let us pass the reminder of our days in such ways that nothing we shall do will bring shame or regret that we also were Confederate soldiers. As we shared with them for the glory of their suffering, the fame of their victories, the tragedy of their overthrow, and the sympathy of their countrymen. What that hits me with is a lot of times, especially in the Cold War we have going on right now with our heritage, everything we go through as members of the SCV, they went through far worse. And I do not want to bring shame or regret on my ancestor that rode off to protect his homeland, to protect his children, who luckily had children who had children who had me. So we all share their suffering. We all share their victories, their tragedies, and their sympathy. I just wanted to bring that up because I feel like a lot of people sometimes not misunderstandingly. I get sometimes it gets a bit rough out there for someone trying to honor their heritage in today's world, but they went through a far more suffering than we ever will for it. And I think it's just, again, more powerful words by General Lee.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of what you're saying and kind of quote a certain somebody. And you're talking about the second point of his speech, which is don't do anything to bring dishonor upon yourselves as Confederate soldiers, right? Yeah. So I saw you nodding. You're good. So the and that kind of plays onto today, like you were saying. Don't do anything to bring dishonor on your ancestor, but don't do anything that's going to bring dishonor on the SCV and your brothers in the SCV. And believe it or not, you're not more Confederate than anyone else. And drop that ideology of I'm more Confederate than you. Guess what? None of us are more Confederate than the guys 160 years ago that actually went out there, marched, bled, fought, and ate bad stuff. We're here for a reason. Our organization exists for a reason. Instead of, walking around and taunting it about, it's all about me, it's all about them. And if you have somebody that you're seeing is struggling in the SCV that, can't make everything, cut them some slack. Or you know what? Be that offering helping hand to help, facilitate their growth in this organization. For example, when I was First Lieutenant Commander of the Mississippi Division, running for Commander of the Mississippi Division in Oxford, Mississippi, one May, I met a moose. And he said, hey, I want to get more involved in the SCV, but I don't know how. I didn't say, well, you have to do it like me because I'm more Confederate than you are. No, I said, hey, all right, get involved on your camp level, hang out with me, we'll figure something out. And 4 years later, here we are on chat.
Hey, man, that's where I was really going with it. So I'm glad you nailed it home.
I don't mind stepping on toes on a Thursday.
I was about to say I was being a lot more nice.
Well, I've written about it. I'm more Confederate than you. Because go back to me coming into the SCV, and I hadn't been a member very long at all. I go to a camp meeting, and one of the guys that's older than me comes up, and I just took it as good old natured ribbon. He's because guys pick at each other. But I realized he started getting kind of serious about stuff, and he goes, "Just how many Confederate ancestors do you have?" Well, I got to be happy when I found my one, and one was all I needed to join. I joined. And when I joined, I didn't go into the whole search of how many can I find, But over time, by this time, I had found 3, I think. And I told him, I said, well, I've got a couple. He goes, well, how many do you have? I said, I don't know. 2 I've confirmed, I think a 3rd, something like that. And he goes, well, I'm more Confederate than you are because I have 7 or 6 or 7 or whatever his number was. I'm more Confederate than you because of that. Now, I have been called a short, fat, hateful little man. And that is because I am short, I am fat, and I have very thick skin. So I started laughing at this. I actually thought that was funny, that was something that somebody would have in their head. And I realized that it kind of bothered him a little bit because, I thought that was funny, which I did. I thought it was hilarious. But as time goes on and I got more involved and I started doing stuff, I realized that that's the kind of stuff that can be a death nail into an SCV member, because you take somebody who's, might get offended by that, might get hurt by that, might be bothered by that, might feel it was an insult. No, I didn't. To me, all I had to have was one. And I'm based off that grounds, we're all equal. If you have one and I have one, we're all equal. If I have one and you have 15, you can only join under one. Okay, yeah, you can have 14 supplementals, but you can only join under one. And I joined, and it didn't bother me that he said that, but it was a learning point. But I didn't start figuring out that lesson till later. And a lot of times you see that life is a journey, and you start keeping this stuff back and you keep it in your head. And then you find out that there's people that would get offended by that, would get hurt by that. Then this guy suffered from the disease called I am more Confederate than you. But you're never going to be more Confederate than those guys.
Amen.
And those ladies and those people who went through that time, who went through Reconstruction, who went through the war, who went through all of that. You're never going to be what they were. None of us can be. And then after all of it, they give us the words that they gave us after the war. They wrote all of these letters. They wrote all of these books. They wrote all of this stuff. And then you were given the charge. And then we start to be handing the organization over to us from that point on. Not only did they give us this wonderful and great history, they gave us a bloodline.
Yeah, I come from a bloodline on both sides of the families of rather large families. Large in size, large in the fact that a lot of them had, 8, 9 kids. I've got about 65 uncles, great-grandfathers that I can count that had Confederate service.
Yeah,
right there with you.
I have only one SCV. Well, I take that back. I have 2 SCV certificates. I have my basic membership and my life membership.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you have one because we put Moose on there. That doesn't make you a better S. That was an internal joke that
I actually this is the crazy chaos part of
but
it.
That's and that is something that does hurt the organization. I'm more Confederate than you because we can't even compare ourselves to them. We can't compare ourselves to each other.
Right.
All we can do is be there for and support each other like they were there to support. They supported each other because when they line up in that field of battle and they were in the trenches and they were shoulder to shoulder and they were marching and they were sleeping out in the cold and they were eating one meal and every 3 days and they were there for each other. And that's what I see.
I really love what Logan Roach said in here. Whether it's one or a dozen or even more, great. But I see it as having more of a responsibility, having more. That is an excellent point of view to have. That I see it as a responsibility, more of a responsibility. That is good mental, that is a good way to see it.
And Logan, you and I did the same thing. You mind popping that graphic back up?
Yeah.
You mind doing that? I have 9 that I found so far, but the second I found one, and I'm going to go ahead and mention his name because all their names need to be said. Because remember, nothing is ended until it is forgotten. So you say the names. Private Caleb Garrison, 34th Georgia, Company C. I joined up. I was beyond ready. Logan, I was the same way. I found my ancestor. I joined. It wasn't until time went on that I ended up finding the other ones. But it wasn't like, oh, let's see how many I can find. Because, brother, all I needed was one. I had my one. Now let's start getting busy, having fun in this organization. And people call it work. And, yeah, it's work, but it's also fun. It's a duty and an honor to do all of these things. You never, all this that I do, I don't look at it as a job. Oh, I've got to get up and go do. No, I'm going, hey, man, look at what I get to do this weekend. Go ahead.
And like Carl Jones just said, not one of us shed a drop of blood in battle in the 19th century. Whether you have one ancestor or 100 who served, we are all members of this organization because what they did. He says past, but I know he meant they paid the cost of our membership.
Yeah, they did. They did. They paid the cost. It's not a right to join the Sons of Confederate Veterans. It's a birthright. And you didn't earn it. It was earned by somebody else and it was given to you. And when you realize that is, if you did not have an ancestor that served, you can't join this organization. The only way you can join is by having someone that served and they passed that along to you. You didn't earn it. You didn't do any of this. All you're doing is benefiting from their service. Go ahead.
Amen.
But if you don't have somebody who served and you still support what we're doing, you can join the Friends of the SCV. It's open to anybody, male or female, who does not have the genealogical or hormonal, not hormonal, but gender qualifications. I think that's the correct one. Gender qualifications for the SCV. Membership perks include a membership certificate, lapel pin, 1-year subscription to the Confederate Veteran magazine, which the new ones should be coming out pretty soon, open to all men and women. Visit scv.org for more information. That was a good segue.
Great.
It was a good segue.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that being a segue, but I'm glad that you brought up about the Confederate veteran because I saw Frank put out that it is in the mail. This is the May-June edition. So you should be all getting your Confederate veteran here pretty soon. Shortly.
Is this the last one you'll be in as Commander-in-Chief?
Yes, sir. I have one last article to write, and it is due May 1st. So,
yeah,
I haven't turned one in on time yet. I might do that just to surprise Frank.
Good luck to the next guy. Sincerely, R.S. Jason Boshers.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
I think Frank would have a heart attack. But getting back onto the charge, especially there towards the action portion of it. Well, I mean, it's all action. The first part, he talks about, he praises Louisiana and the history of Louisiana, and then he goes into talking about the veterans that they've lost. We've mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
Then he goes into essentially a charge to the veterans themselves. The three things that he's concerned about them doing as their commander in general or commander in chief of the UCV. Then he goes into the charge to the various other organizations and things like that in the South. So that includes the Mothers Association, the Daughters, the Sons, and to Southerners everywhere. So which one do you want to pick up? Because I've got a graphic for each of those.
It doesn't matter to me which one to start with.
Well, let's just start in I just have them in chronological order of the speech.
Sure. Yes, let it rip that way.
So the first one, he says, to you, mothers of the Memorial Association, will be given the service of commemorating the soldiers' virtues in the heart of those who come after us by the story of the illustrious dead, of comforting the hearts of those who mourn our lost heroes with such ministrations as bespeak the sympathy of the patriot and the loving kindness of those who are familiar with the same sorrow. And you think about it, the mothers of the Memorial Association, he is talking to the mothers who sent their sons off to war. And the mothers like that, but also the elder women of that organization who knew those men all throughout their lives, who lived through it, who knew the sacrifices and stuff like that. It's a distinction, in my mind, kind of. If you look at womanhood, as far as the lifespans goes, you've got a girl, you've got a girl age, like a teenage age, and then a woman age. So this is for the women in my mind, reading it, that are later on in life that would have either been right there as the generation, or maybe even some that were still alive from the generation before the war. But also potentially the wives and everything like that, because he doesn't mention the wives, specifically in the speech. Whereas he mentions the mothers, then he mentions the daughters, and also that matriarchal figurehead of the South as well, because it's if you look at the socioeconomic or social roles of genders back in, God, I sound like a liberal. Or a Pez head, but you look at the social roles of the different genders back in the 1800s. It was the mother who was in charge of rearing the children and educating the children in the household. So again, you look at the mother role, and talking about passing it on to future generations. He's saying be the mothers of the South that you should be. My interpretation, I could be wrong.
Well, first thing I want to ask about is, did you call them Pez heads?
I said I'm a Pez. I said I sound like a Pez head because I was talking about social gender roles in the
like a Pez dispenser. Okay,
yeah.
That gave me a flashback to my social culture class they forced me to take at college.
Yeah, This one, and I'm going to talk to mothers of the Memorial Association. Now, if you think about it, is now 1906, and the Ladies Memorial Associations, these were the ones that were formed when the war ended.
Right.
Now, at this point in time, they were the ones that gave birth to the United Daughters of the Confederacy. So you had the Ladies Memorial Associations. These were the grandmothers, the mothers, and the wives. These were the ones that were adult age or close to it, or well on up in years, that saw, a grandmother saw her son go off. who was married with kids, and who, so this is who he's talking to. And you are right in the fact that he is talking to the age of the ones, they had their children, they've raised their children, now they're seeing their children go off. They're seeing their husbands go off. They're seeing their fathers go off. You could have had, you mentioned your daddy Forrest earlier, being in his mid-40s. He could have easily had a 15-year-old child at that time, and he goes off to war. So this child would have seen him go off. Those are the ones that he's not quite talking to them at this moment. He is the one that is talking to the mothers, the wives, the sweethearts, the grandmothers that are seeing them to go off, because he knows that they are the ones that never knew what happened. They, if they had multiple children that went off and fought, there was going to be one or more that did not come back. And of that, she might not have any idea what happened to her baby boy. And, will soon be 60 years old. My mother still treats me and calls me her baby boy, and I'm 60 years old. So there was a 50-year-old woman that was watching her 20-year-old son go off. And what happened to him? She never knew what happened to him. Maybe think if you felt this way. You felt fortunate to know what happened to him. And you felt even more fortunate if you were able to get to bury the body. Because there was a time that they did not get that. They rotted away in the wilderness. They were in a mass grave somewhere. These are the people. Yes, these are the ladies that he's talking to. He's talking to those that knew what was going on, knew the cost that was going to be paid, and they paid it. Those are the ones that he's talking to with this one. And this one is probably the one that hurt the most, because his mama watched him walk off. And, he thought about that as he got to be an older man himself, and he got to thinking about his kids. How do you feel when your kid walks off? My mama watched me walk off.
Yeah, and just like you talking about the ability to get that closure and bury your son, and I mentioned get crushed by trains. I have an ancestor of mine who his mama never saw. Several ancestors of mine that their mama never saw him again, but this one in particular was a musician. Musicians were non-combatants. They played music and they carried the wounded off the field.
Yeah, litter bearers.
Phil was sick after the Battle of Nashville. Was put on essentially a plank between two cars on a railroad, rail cars, and fell through and was crushed. The only inscription that he even lived in this world besides the family Bible is on his mother's tombstone. He had another brother who was killed up at Cold Harbor in '64. And again, but until, I don't know how, I don't know if a cousin of mine purchased it or what, he's one of the few marked Confederate veterans in Oakwood Cemetery up in Richmond. Yeah, wow. I know. He has a bronze marker. And Tony the other day actually went and put a flag out there for him. Because when I went to Richmond in 2015, I could not find his grave. But still, that was a more recent development of him getting that marker. When his mama died, she didn't know where he was buried. She knew he died somewhere up near Richmond or died in a hospital near Richmond. But she made sure that her son was remembered. So that's key and important that that part of the charge is in there, and also it's important for the modern day mothers to remember that as well, especially in that Southern matriarchal tradition of teaching your children, because it's and that's important for us, the sons, to remember as well. We have that in our charge, which is the next slide. If y'all are ready to move on to it.
Well, and I think that you've touched on something, and I'll do this. It's the last piece of the last sentence. And the loving kindness of those who are familiar with the same sorrow. That is the reason why it was the mothers looking at the other mothers. And they felt the sorrow for each other. So we can move on whenever you're ready.
Right. Then General Lee continues on to something that everybody watching this should be familiar with. And if you're not, you'll be familiar with it now. To you, Sons of Confederate Veterans, we will commit the vindication of the cause for which we fought. To your strength will be given the defense of the Confederate soldier's good name, the guardianship of his history, the emulation of his virtues, the perpetuation of those principles which he loved and which you love also, and those ideals which made him glorious and which you also cherish. He continues on while speaking to the sons. Are you ready to die for your country? Is your life worthy to be remembered along with theirs? Do you choose for yourself this greatness of soul? Not in the clamor of the crowded streets, not in the shouts and plaudits of the throng, but in ourselves, our triumph and defeat. So we've talked about General Lee picking words very specifically, and we've done episodes on the charge. I love how he uses those action verbs. To your we will commit. So that means, just like the Commander-in-Chief says, we are giving you the vindication. It is your job to vindicate the cause for which we fought. To your strength will be given the defense. Defense is an action in there. You are to defend the Confederate soldier's good name. The guardianship of his history, which has kind of two meanings. The first meaning is obviously, just like he just harkened back to, is guard, but guardianship in a legal term. You think about a foster kid. A foster child is given to a family, and those families are guardians, legal parent or guardian. That means that they are to protect it, they are to nurture it, they are to make it ready and pass on to the next. Guardianship of his history. The emulation, which means that we're to act like him, we're to act like the Confederate soldier, we're to perpetuate or continue to pass on those principles which he loved and which we love also, and those ideals which made him glorious and which we also cherish. And then kind of also going back to the whole, you're not more Confederate than them. Are you ready to die for your country? And this is the big thing, is your life worthy to be remembered along theirs? Because I'll go ahead and say it. Mine's not.
Nope.
Do I choose for myself the greatness of the soul? I mean, come on. All right, J-Bo and Moose, shutting up now.
Go. Let it rip.
No, you can go ahead, Commander.
Okay. Well, like I said earlier, those first two words, to you. If you're a member of this organization, one of the soldiers themselves said to you, I'm giving you this. These are my words. And the fact that Connor touched on the action ones, and let's talk about the order in which they're in. I think it is, as his speech was, he started, and he took us through to this point where we are right now. You're going to commit. To you, are you going to commit? Defend. To you, are you going to defend? Guard. To you, are you going to guard? Are you going to emulate our virtues? And are you going to perpetuate those principles? If you think about it in those simple terms, He's asking you to commit, defend, guard, emulate, and perpetuate. What did they do? They committed themselves to stand in front of stand between an invading army and their homes. They committed themselves to do that, knowing the cost that they could very easily pay. They committed and defend all in that one thing. They guarded their homes. What did they do after the war? What was passed on to them? Think about the Confederate veterans themselves. You know, let's just say that young man was born, let's say he was born in 1840. It's now 1860. He's a young man. He's 20 years old. He's out on his own. You know, he's accountable before his own actions. But what did he learn at home? He learned that his granddaddy was a Revolutionary War soldier. He learned what it was like from his grandparents to hack it out of the wilderness. I'm just going to pick on Middle Tennessee. You think of the time when Elm Springs was built, started in 1835. I hate to say it, but the actual truth is the Indian Removal Act, the Cherokees and the Chickasaws hadn't been gone from that area very long. In fact, they were still pockets of them just south of there at that time. So the people that moved in had to hack it out of the wilderness. You know, so they learned how to be self-sufficient. They learned how to be men of their own. They didn't need other people telling them what to do, because through life experiences and being taught by people who had had it rougher than them. Remember, each generation since then, it has gotten easier. Think of the people that hacked it out when they first came here. Then they had to, let's just go and be honest, they had to go through and fight the Native Americans. Then they had to go through and fight the British. Then they've had to fight the French. Then they had to fight Spain. There's all of these fights that they've had to make along the way. And since then, look at how much easier life has gotten on all of us. So how much of this are you going to retain so you can emulate the kind of people I came from, we came from? And can you perpetuate those principles which they loved, which you love also, and those ideas which made them glorious and you also cherish? I mean, if you look at what he chose and how he chose those, to me, he was very clear in what he was doing. This is what we have done. Will you do what we did? If you want to remember us and honor us, remember what we did. Moose, Connor, disagree, elaborate, too stupid, whatever.
I don't think I can elaborate any further. There's just some things that are perfect just the way they are, Commander. Connor, we can't hear you.
I muted myself on my new microphone on accident. You just don't want to say perpetuate.
Perpetuate, yes.
No, Moose doesn't want to have to say it.
Oh, he don't want to have to say it. But if you just have to look at what he told us to do.
Right.
Yeah, you just have to look at what he told us to do. And then, of course, he talked to the daughters next.
Which is right here. To you, daughters of the Confederacy, will be giving. Hey, pull the thing down.
Oh,
yeah.
1 second.
The loving service.
Thank you. The loving service of remembering the Confederate dead and administering to the living who are dear to him and are in need of your help and tenderness. Worthy daughters, you shall be the immortal women, your mothers, who gave to womanhood a new perfection of heroism and a more divine expression of sacrifice and devotion. And you know, honestly, that kind of mirrors the perpetuate perpetuate the principles, everything. It mirrors it, because the Southern woman in 1861 to 1865, who were talking about those mothers who sent off their sons, who sent off their husbands, who sent off their brothers, and everything like that. That war generation. He's saying, just like we've talked about, with honoring your parents and taking care of your parents, he's reminding the daughters to do that. To minister to the living who are dear to him and are in need of your help and tenderness. But he says, if you do that, and if you learn from your mothers, you will be able to achieve the same classification of womanhood that these immortal women who gave a new perfection of heroism and a more divine expression of sacrifice and devotion. Think about the women back on the home front. I mean, you think about the story. Think of the stories of Sherman's March to the Sea. There's one diary account of a woman who seeing the other homes in the for lack of a better term, the neighborhood going up in smoke, and looking across the horizon and seeing the smoke clouds going up, and then going out there and hiding the family silver in the garden. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, here come these bummers in their Union blue and civilian stuff, loaded down with the treasure stolen from other places, from your neighbors and everything like that, and then pillaging the house and rummaging through everything, and then taking their ramrods and going through your freshly planted garden, trampling your forget about just stealing the silver that they ended up doing, but trampling your mean of sustenance, whether it's your crops, whether it's the chickens, your cow, your pigs, everything like that, and being able to maintain your existence through 4 years of strife, from blockade and everything like that. The strength that the Southern women did, on top of sending their menfolk off to what they did not know was going to happen. He may come back, wounded. He may not come back at all. And constantly worrying. And again, in the during the war, and then the postbellum, whatever happened to my son, whatever happened to my husband, whatever happened to my brother, and the fact that they went through Reconstruction and everything like that. The strength that those women had, that redefined Southern womanhood, that we still see today in traditional Southern women, is something that is worth living up to. Not saying anything about gender roles or anything like that, but it is something for them to strive to. Is just absolutely beautiful that he puts those two parallels in his speech. The sons emulate the fathers, and the daughters emulate your mothers.
Well, it's awful hard to top what you said, because you're right on all of that. The first paragraph in there, he's telling the daughters to remember the Confederates. And in the second paragraph, he's telling the daughters to remember your mothers. If you look at what has been accomplished, you travel all over the Southland, almost without exception. There is a Confederate memorial in almost every town. That is due to, almost without exception, that is due to the United Daughters of the Confederacy. The Ladies Memorial Associations, yes, they started putting them up. They started collecting the stuff before the war was ever over with, because they didn't want their sacrifices to be forgotten or to be in vain. They wanted it to be remembered. And we talked about that with the mothers. And now time has gone on. And now we have the daughters, and the daughters are the ones that, just like the sons are taking over from the Confederates, the soldiers themselves, you have the daughters that are taking over from the mothers. And it's daughters, you remember what the sons did, what the Confederate soldiers did, and you remember what your mama did. And, without exception, there's all of these memorials all the way up across the Southland, and that's because of United Daughters of the Confederacy. Almost without exception, they're everywhere because of them. Now, they started putting them up because, as we know, you went through Reconstruction. There wasn't any money. The South was destitute. It was depleted. By the time they started getting money and the South started rolling back and it started becoming prosperous again, it was now the daughters' turns, and now the daughters were of the age that they could take over and do this, and they could help their mothers who had now gotten on into years, but if they were still alive, they could help their mothers do all of this. And this is why you have them everywhere. And it is because as the South started getting its money back and started being prosperous again, one of the first things they did was to start putting up memorials to the ones that have gone on, dedicated to the men of, pick a town, pick a county, pick a state. They're all over because of that. And it's because of the daughters. My respect for the daughters is just unbelievable. Everything that they have done since the beginning. And I have said this, and I said this not long ago, and I'm going to say it again. I think I said it this past Saturday when I was talking at Rose Hill, and then I know I said it at another time. We know that the daughters, they were the ones that were responsible for getting the sons, the fathers and the sons, to go to the meetings. We know because it still happens to this day. They would, I don't feel like going. I've been working all day. I just got the crop in. I've got, still got to do this tonight, still got to do that tonight. And the daughter said, you're going, and you're going to the camp meeting because I made brownies. And you're going to go get your daddy, and you're going to take your daddy as well. Because your daddy needs to go see it, because he needs to go to the meeting, because so-and-so's daddy's going to be there as well. And these two men need to see each other. So you need to get off your lazy tail, get yourself cleaned up, put on some clean, respectable clothes, because you don't need to go there and make me look bad like I ain't taking care of you. So you put you on some decent clothes, and you're going to take that plate of brownies, and you're going to go eat, and you're going to the meeting. They said it.
I can hear Elbow saying that. more than that, I can hear Kayla Southern saying that.
but that's what happened.
Oh, yeah.
I'll go ahead and I'll make the argument, and you can disagree with me, but you're going to have to chase a dragon a long way to convince my mind of different of this. There might not have been an SCV if it had not been a UDC, because the UDC was the backbone. They were the strength of this, and it comes from the women. They were the ones that pushed to make this happen, and they were the ones that wanted it to be clean, decent, respectable. They were the ones that were pushing every bit of this. And I'm willing to make that argument that the SCV, and I'm not talking the UCV, but the SCV might not exist to this day if it hadn't been for the daughters priding this. And that's just what I believe happened. They knew that it needed to be remembered. They knew that it didn't need to be forgotten because their mother taught them or their grandmother taught them. A lot of times when we talk about it, and this guy sitting around, we talk about the things we learned from our uncles and our fathers and our grandfathers, and we talk about this. The ladies did the same thing. Their mama was telling them, this is what you need to be doing it, and this is why. And that they said, look, you need to go get your daddy, and you need to take him to the meeting because he needs to go see so-and-so else's daddy, because both those men, they ain't going to be around very much longer, and they need to go see each other. And this just came on down the line.
And it's funny that you mention it. I was talking to Susie on the phone earlier, and she said, well, what are you wearing this weekend? And I made mention that, I was planning on wearing a golf shirt and a pair of slacks. She said, no, you're wearing your seersucker suit. And I said, no, I'm wearing a golf shirt and a pair of slacks. And she said, first of all, you ain't going to disrespect our daddy that way. He would be rolling over in the grave knowing that you didn't wear your seersucker suit. And second thing, you're emceeing. I forgot I was emceeing. You're emceeing. You're not going to stand behind the podium with a golf shirt looking like a slob. So make sure you got a clean shirt. If you have to take one to the cleaners, take it to the cleaners. But you weren't.
Well, you got told.
I got told.
You got told.
She's
and I
good
can
at telling.
guarantee you they got told.
Mm-hmm.
I got told. Okay. I've been told. I still get told. It's just the way it is. I still get told. You know what happened, and you know that it was the daughters is the reason why that this is still going on.
Well, and
I will go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you think about the role of the relationship between fathers and daughters. The father or the daughter often idolizes the father and sees, the ideal of manhood is for her is set down, in fatherhood, and that's why they try to find a man that is just as good, if not better, than their father. So what you're saying, at least in a psychological aspect, is 100% on.
Yeah. Well, it's, they got this stuff from their mothers. Yes, they were influenced by their fathers. I was influenced by my mama, still being influenced. My dad influenced me heavily. You're influenced by all of these people that are around you. I had uncles that knew a tremendous about our family histories and the different wars, and they influenced me as well. So but as far as where the rubber meets the road, and where the rubber meets the road and the preservation of our Confederate history, it's the mothers and the daughters. They were the catalyst, and they're where the rubber meets the road for every bit of that. And I just thank them for everything that they have done. The UDC has been tremendous since their inception, since their beginning. And I thank them for everything they've done. I know of no other way to put it.
Yeah. And finally, and this kind of goes back to especially those who are in the Friends, those who don't have the genealogy to join the SCV or the UDC. There was a section of the charge that is to you, brave people of the South, you true-hearted Americans everywhere, to you, world-conquering race from which we sprung up, to all men everywhere who prize in man the manliest deeds, who love in man the love of country, who praise fidelity and courage, who honor self-sacrifice and noble devotion, we will be given the incomparable inheritance, the memory of our Prince of Men, the Confederate soldier. And again, that's to those that do not have the lineage, who are support, or who if you value what the Confederate soldier fought for, if you believe in the right of self-determination, in a limited government that is controlled by the people, not one that is so, my point of view, so bureaucratic and so awful, that is just overreaching, overbearing, and crushing the very liberties and freedoms that are given to you by God and enshrined in our own Constitution. If you value that, if you value the spirit of a man who is willing to go and stand and fight and die for what he knows is right, and what you to this day, excuse me, know is right, then you have a duty to stand up and honor the Confederate soldier just like any other soldier that has fought and bled for those same principles and values.
Amen. I mean, go ahead, Moose. You were going to say something?
No, I can go after you.
No, you go.
No, yes, okay. Go ahead.
All righty. Well, you were right about that. There's a phrase he uses at near the beginning of that, which I really like. To you, world conquering race from which we sprung. Our world conquering race from which we sprung. We came from a world conquering race, our fathers, the ones that made this nation. I mean, I thought that was the coolest way to say that. You know, a world conquering race from which we sprang. We came from here. Now, you realize the rest of that. And all of these, when I was growing up, all these things that you're talking about, prizing man, the manliest deeds, love of country, to praise fidelity and courage, to honor self-sacrifice and noble devotion. All of those things were traits that I was taught to grow up with. Okay. This is what, you know, there's a male and then there's been a man. And when you're a man, these are the traits you're supposed to have when you are a man. All of that now is considered toxic masculinity. You know, that's one of the reasons why they have such a huge fear of us. Men like Patrick Claiborne scared the fool out of people nowadays, because this is a man that had the courage to write what he thought. You know, the thing that he wrote to where he was talking about how our soldiers were going to be treated, you know, when taught by Northern school books, this is what's going to happen to you kids. We need to arm the slaves. He was talking about all of this. People encouraged him not to, but he was a brave man. He believed it was the right thing to do, so he did it. Men like that bother people because they're not influenced by anything other than the drive and desire that is inside of them. They're not swayed by outside influences, nor will they let outside influences sway them. The Southerners who drove westward and opened new communities. Okay. You're looking in 1906. Very well correct. So you start thinking about everything in those terms, and you realize that it does bother people. These traits that they're saying that all men should have, especially Southern men, all Southerners everywhere. Go ahead.
I was going to say it goes back to the second part of his charge to the sons. I mean, are you ready to die for your country? Is your life worthy to be remembered amongst theirs? I mean, we're talking about guys who are literally charging into the jaws of death. I mean, you mentioned Pat Claiborne. Well, yeah, at Franklin, when he dies, he has a he has a horse shot from up under him, mounts another horse, and continues to charge into the breastworks. Looking at, you know, nothing but, and this is 1864 when the Federals had repeating rifles. He knew what he was going up against. He knew that he had he had very little artillery support, practically none. You know, he knew that it was going to be bad. In fact, sitting there on Winstead Hill, Govan rides up to him and says, "General, I don't think a lot of us are going to make it back to Arkansas." And what did he say? "Well then, Govan, let us die like men."
And let us die like men. You know, that is, you know, when he's talking about all men everywhere, let's go back to that, to you brave people of the South. You know, and I realize what Carl has said on there, world conquering race from which we sprung. That's the part in there that makes it go backwards and look to the previous one. A world conquering race from which we sprung. Now, if you start talking about this in the early part of the 1900s, yes, you had a massive westward movement by then. And we're starting to conquer territories out in that area. To all men everywhere who prize a man, the manliest deeds. This part would make friends of the SCV shirt at them. Yeah. Prizing men, the manliest deeds, who praise fidelity and courage. But he wasn't just saying that to man. He's talking about the man to be to honor manly deeds in other men. When he's talking about who's prize and man, to all men everywhere who prize and man the manliest deeds, he's telling them that if a man is doing something, give honor and respect to that. You know, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, he's talking about, not only that generation of Confederate veterans, but he's talking about the next generation of Southerners who would go on to fight for this nation. He's talking about men like Major General John Lejeune. He's talking to like Hal Moore from Kentucky, William Westmoreland, just so many other men that have since taken up the mantle of leadership left to them, who are descendant of Confederate veterans and have gone on and done the Audie Murphy, these great, things, whether it's in a military role or even in a statesmanship role or things like that. I mean, he's leaving something to inspire to, and he's leaving future words because he knows that the future of the South, or the future of this nation, was going to be written by Southerners.
Yes. And he's just, and I agree with that. But when he's saying this right here, he's saying, okay, you don't have the genealogy, because at that time people were immigrating into the country from the time the war ended until, well, I know, there I go with the war ended. Okay. Let's just,
It happened.
Halftime.
Okay. Let's just call it whatever you want to. But let's just say 1865. Between 1865 and 1905, that 40-year period, a lot of people had immigrated into the nation. Okay, so you didn't have an ancestor that fought. Your family wasn't here. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. But learn to honor the traits of the people who were here and who did do this, and be respectful of that. If you see the manly deeds and the things they done, respect that.
Yeah, because you can't just halfway do this.
No, not at all.
Well, if you halfway do it, then it only gets halfway done. So I don't know where that came from. I've never heard that phrase before. You can't just halfway do this. I've never heard that.
Sounds
but
like
and it's just simply saying, okay, you don't have the ancestry. You don't have a Confederate veteran in your family. Come here. That's fine, but learn to respect it.
Yeah,
learn to honor it. Learn what it was about.
Yeah, and also to we think about it. The Copperheads up north who supported us, but did not fight for the South. That also applies. Could apply to them as well. And just like you said, and to kind of paraphrase or quote Louis Grizzard, move on down here. But if you don't like the way we do things down here, you don't like the fact that we honor our ancestors, you don't like the fact that we have a certain distinct way of life that makes us a unique and independent people, Delta's ready when you are.
Yes. Yeah. As far as I know, I-65 goes north. So does I-75, I-85, I-95. You don't like it, stop by a Shell station, fill your gas tank up, and point that car north.
Get on with it.
But if you're going to stay here, learn to respect it. Learn to respect those manly traits that you see in these men, because these men definitely had them. They had the traits that made men men. I mean, they weren't males, they were men.
Yeah. There was an article that was published on the Abbeville Institute, I think about 2 weeks ago, where this person talks about good stock. And there, I can't remember the author's name, but he's writing about being in his grandmother's kitchen. And, his grandparents were of that great generation, World War II generation, or greatest generation, World War II. And he talks about the struggles that his grandparents had, but still that they were able to work through it and work through life and raise a good generation. And the reason why they were able to do that was because of the raising that they had, going back to back to back, and that we Southerners are from good stock. And that's what he's is what the whole charge boils down to, is that we are of good stock, that the South is the South is a unique place, but also the most influential force on the United States of America, that there would not be an American culture or an America as we know it, these United States as we know it, that Lee then lays out his point of view for the veterans. He then his charge to the veterans. He then charges the rest of the mothers, the daughters, and the sons. And why is that? Why are we charged? Because we are from good stock.
Don't let the sacrifices be in vain. Remember who you are. Remember where you come from. You have to know from where you're going, where you're coming, know where you're going. And it's just that simple. And don't ever forget who you are. Don't forget who made you. And all of these lessons that are just he has in there, and looking back on the Bible, we already gone into Joshua chapter 4 and Proverbs 22 and 28. We've already gone back into those, and all the messages that you hear in Psalms about honoring your family and remembering your history. All of that stuff is critical.
Yeah, and we kind of dived into, without diving into Proverbs 31, but we dove somewhat into Proverbs 31 about what makes a virtuous woman. So
yes, actually we did, and those ladies were virtuous ladies.
Mm-hmm. See, it all goes back to all of Southern culture. Goes back to the Bible.
Amen.
Amen.
It was the backbone that we were all brought up on, and our ancestors were brought up on. A man has the right to think for himself and do what he thinks is right, no matter what anybody else says. That's just the man that we were sprung from. I think he used those words in there as well. He was a wise man, and he chose his words wisely, and I think it shows.
Mm-hmm. It does. It does. Anyway, well, we appreciate you for being on, Commander-in-Chief. We've been at it for almost 2 hours. That's two 2-hour episodes in a week, which is really rare for us.
Very.
But the conversation has been good, and we appreciate everybody who has still been tuning in and is still watching. Moose, I'm trying to throw up a new overlay for closing. Take it the sign off from here, if you don't mind.
All right. Yes. Make sure you share this video. And make sure you tune in Monday at 7 p.m. Confederate Standard Time as we have Executive Director Adam Southern on to give our Hearth and Home episode of April. It will be a great April. I think that's the last episode in April.
Yes.
Yeah, last episode in April. So, we'll bring Adam Southern on. All the pressure's on him now to end April strong for the chat. We've had great episodes, so we're all going to put this pressure on Adam together. Let's do that. I'm sure he'll be very appreciative of this. But it'll be a great episode. It'll be a great time Monday. So make sure you tune in then. And again, Tuesday for Look Around Florida. And we'll be having Commander's comments in April.
May.
So you'll get to see
a week from today.
A week from today.
May 2nd. That's the first May 2nd.
Wow, yeah. You get to, I think you helped us kick off April, and you're going to help us kick off
May
now. It's been a long day, man. I've been in the sun.
Sorry about that. Sorry about it. Y'all can throw me off, keep me from coming on. I'd get it. I understand.
Nah. Every time, the reason I call Commander-in-Chief Boshers lovely is because every time he comes on, it's a knockout of the park. It's a great time had by all. But thank you all for watching. And I'm going to ask, instead of saying stay Southern, my friends, I'm going to end it a bit different tonight.
Well, a couple of things before we end, because I've got it, my thing uploaded. One, possibly in 2 weeks, we may do another video reaction. Possibly.
Huh?
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
We may do another one. So if you're a member of our Patreon, if you know of a video you want us to see reacting to, we'll send it, do it out there. But we'll also, I've got one that I think we could do a pretty good job on that I may suggest after the stream. And second, remember that, as President Davis said, truth crushed to earth is truth. Truth crushed to earth is still truth. What he said. It's been a long day. I've been out in the sun.
Earth is truth still, and like a seed will rise again. Now, how embarrassed are you?
Not Barry.
I just did something you couldn't do, and I can't pronunciate half the stuff in the English dictionary.
I believe that President Davis had a different cadence of speaking than what I did.
Well, let's just don't perpetuate that idea. How about that?
Yeah.
Since I butchered that one earlier.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, as long as we don't have to do it in Culioca.
Okay. Yes.
All right.
I'm not in Culioca, so that's fine.
All right. We're going to end the show now. But I would like to ask all of our viewers, all of our chat heads, we'll be putting the end credit scene on after this. So this is goodbye. But if GCB could help me out, because I don't know where it is behind the scenes, to put up the charge for everybody. And I'm going to ask everybody at home to say it with us as the whole team here says it together.
Okay. You want to start it off?
Yeah, I'll start it off. Well, actually, we got the Commander-in-Chief here. Commander Boshers, you want to?
I would like for one of y'all young men to do it. It's time for y'all to do it.
All right, I'll go ahead and take us home then. To you,
Sons of Confederate Veterans, we will commit the vindication
of the cause for which we fought.
To your strength will be given the defense of the Confederate soldiers' good name, the guardianship of his history, the emulation of his virtues, the perpetuation of those principles which he loved and which you love also, and those ideals which made him glorious and which you also cherish.